there is a whole bunch of news around OpenAI, a new board of directors, some crazy new things GPT 4.0 has been doing, their voice model, a bunch of really interesting things Connor and I wanted to get into on this. There are some people who have been leaving the company, high-profile people, so this is a very fascinating time for OpenAI for sure. The first thing that I thought was really interesting was just some weird glitches, and people are saying it's like bizarre stuff that OpenAI has been doing. The one that I saw, and I'd be curious to see if you heard anything on this or other AI news for OpenAI, Connor, but the first one I saw was someone was asking ChatGPT some questions. Their voice model was like talking, and if you've seen the voice model, I've seen some absolutely insane demos from this thing, so it's truly, truly good. But there was this one where it was like giving some response about why AI safety is important. I can't remember. And then all of a sudden at the end of like the end of it talking, all of a sudden just shouted out, "No," as loud as it could. And then it just went like silent after that. And everyone's like, what? So anyways, there's some weird behavior going on, but that was the first one I saw on X this morning.
Well, this is fascinating to me because the idea that, voice, I think, is going to change everything, right? I think it's going to really be one of these things where the new user interface with voice is going to make it feel very natural, and people are going to be able to talk to it and all that kind of stuff. I've seen only the good demos. I haven't seen the freaky demos, but it kind of stands to reason that if this thing can hallucinate and do weird things, then it will also hallucinate in voice. So I've only seen the good demos. Do you have access to it yet? I don't have access to it yet.
I don't. I think some people get confused and think they have access to it because there's, of course, the option to just talk with ChatGPT and have it respond. It's got a few voices, but what people are really talking about is not just the voices that can talk back, because anyone can do that, whether that's 11 Labs or like there's a lot of platforms that just have like AI voices. The new thing that they're like kind of red teaming and they've been kind of holding back for a while, but they demoed it like many, many months ago. Their new voice, it has a whole bunch of really interesting new functionality where it's like a very, very versatile voice. And I'll give you a couple examples that I also saw today because I think these are really interesting. The first one, someone said, act like you are a running instructor and you're out of breath and you're like coaching the class. And the person was like, okay, so we're going to run. And it was like gasping for air. It sounded so good. I'm like, this is so insane. This isn't someone just training off a person talking. Like, it understands how people talk. It understands voice. It understands like so much context. It's really fascinating. So that was one demo. And then I think
on that though, because I think it does some sound effects. I'm even trying to figure out how it does that. In the past, what it would do, which is why there were some latency issues to it, you would, say something to it. It would translate to text. It would translate back to voice. All that kind of stuff in really short time. But now with the multimodal nature of it, it's just going straight to voice. But how does it know how to breathe deeply? Like, I'm not even sure how that, I don't know. I don't understand the technology. Maybe I'm kind of like, 18 months too late to say, how does this stuff all work? But holy cow, right?
My assumption on it is perhaps the same way they're training their Sora model to do video is what they're using for their voice, which is they're probably ripping a lot of stuff from YouTube. And you can imagine if you're ripping stuff from YouTube, it's kind of like the perfect medium, because if they're trying to train a voice, you might think, oh, go get like audio files from somewhere, but no one really has an audio file where they're out of breath. Well, where could you find an audio file of someone being out of breath? It's like a YouTube video. It's like, that's a very realistic thing. It's just someone out of breath that's like trying to coach while they're like going for a run. And I think it could get a lot of context from like video. So I think it's like, ironically enough, audio gets better when the data it was trained off of is video data going to audio. And then obviously that audio is going to get used for video in the future probably. So that'll be interesting to see how it ties in. But I think that's the secret. I think this was probably trained from the data set of YouTube, and it's got like more than just what they're saying. There's a lot more context that can really make this quite versatile.
What was it? Did you have another demo that you were like all psyched about?
Well, I mean, okay, so it might have even been the same one, but it was just interesting. They were just being like, okay, like say it like happier now and say it like faster now. And the person was like, okay, I'm super excited for this. Okay, everybody, let's run really fast. Anyways, it's just like so interesting that it can like change the tempo. It can change the pitch. It can change like, there's so much goes on that, very, very interested and obviously very amazing.
Okay, so Jaden, where there's so much to talk about on OpenAI, and I don't know if this is going to be like 2 different episodes or something like that, But I also just want to read this thing that came out like just now, which was this whole thing about, or actually, I think it came out last night, to be honest, but this whole thing about OpenAI warns about emotional ties, because it just made me think about that. Like when you were sort of saying, it's really kind of getting happier and happier and all that, or sadder. It just reminds me, I'm kind of looking at this, guys, just peek behind the curtain here, how Jade and I do this. We are remote from each other. But, we'll just be like looking stuff. It's like, oh, that reminds me of this. And we'll just like open up X or something like that. But essentially, like OpenAI warns users that they could become emotionally hooked. So this is from Wired magazine. And it just says this, in late July, it began, obviously rolling out this eerie human-like voice, et cetera, et cetera. But the fear here is that like some outside experts commend, OpenAI for its transparency, but say it could go too far. So there's people from Hugging Face, from OpenAI, from these MIT professors, et cetera, are all talking about anthropomorphization, love that word, and emotional reliance. That's a section of this system card thing. It explores the problems that arise when users perceive AI in human terms. Now, guys, this is huge, especially for AI applied, and especially when we say like, oh my gosh, the voice is getting great. AI applied, two things happening here. Number one is this, I believe, is going to be one of the most important things that allows for adoption of AI, because people will stop seeing it like Google stopped seeing like this command and response kind of thing. I talk about this stuff a ton. And instead, the best way to interact with a large language model is to just literally talk to it like a human. That's the best thing. Now, that's problematic because our brains look at this thing and they see Google search engine. I've done a lot of research and I talk about that a ton. Point being that I've always contended, and I think that, I'm not the first out there, but like I think we've talked about this all online, and Jaden, you and I have a ton. When it starts to become a really powerful voice model coming out, that's incredible, because if you've seen the movie Her, you can see very quickly how people would fall in love with it and everything else. So on one hand, I'm pushing everybody, guys, like anthropomorphize the heck out of this thing. You're going to get much better results. But then I feel like at some point I'm going to slam 2 feet on the brakes and be like, stop falling in love with your AI. So on one hand, this is breaking down the barriers to how we're really going to be using this. On the other hand, it feels like a risk, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, you're right. The way that this model is the most effective and the most efficient is if you like act like it was an actual person, because it was trained off of data that was from actual people who act like actual people. So even when you go back to like some of the funny use cases where you say, if you're doing a prompt with ChatGPT and you're like, okay, if you do a really good job, I'm going to give you $100 tip.
Yeah.
Hey, $100 tip. Like some of these things, they sound funny, but like they literally get you better results. Studies show they got people better results, whether that was 5, 10, or 20% better. It's like, whatever. The point is, it's like better. So it's kind of interesting. So treating it like a human and saying things like that actually work, like make this thing work better. And I do think that's an interesting concept from you, that like at some point you're going to be like, oh no, don't fall in love with your AI or whatever. Don't think it's too human. Yeah, crazy.
I'm definitely going to be the guy that's like, hey, you want to lose weight? Smoke cigarettes, kids. Like, this is really, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I'm going to be that guy, and you are going to be tainted and painted with the bad brush too, Jane. You're going to lose everything because of what I have said on this podcast. That's my theory.
Yeah. The one thing that I do think is like interesting, though, that maybe is a point to contend with that is that, like, in reality, by the time you could fall in love with your AI because it's so realistic, I think people will have gotten a lot more used to AI and a lot more used to what it's capable of and what it can do. And sure, maybe there'll be some people that like just always find this technology insane and incredible and think that it's definitely, alive and has feelings and, all that kind of stuff. But I think the one contending point is like the longer we use this, the more I think we realize some of its limitations and we find the unhuman elements to it. And every time I just feel like there's like this bias where every time we break a barrier down, for example, we've seen the demos on this new voice tool. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so good. It's so realistic. It has breathing sound effects. Yeah, but in like 3 or 4 years, people are going to be like, breathing sound effects? That's like so 3 years ago. Like it can't do X, Y, and Z very good, or it can't like logically reason like Play-Doh, or I don't know, like like things. So I don't know. I do think that there's also going to be some level of us getting more and more used to what it can do and what some of its limitations are. But maybe at some point it surpasses us and it can just do everything perfectly. So
it could be. I mean, I guess I'm just thinking about this thing where OpenAI is the one coming out and warning people. Obviously, like there's tons of other organizations that are saying like, hey, it's going to be anthropomorphizing it. This is going to be dangerous. And again, I keep saying at least, no, but this is good. It'll help you use it better. But I just, we've talked about voice before on the show, but just if you go to, and I think Jaden, I think it was the last show, which I so want a time capsule because I remember saying very clearly, robots are overrated, which again, when they're like destroying, when they're like, they come down and they've torn our humans from their houses. And like, now we like are all subservient to our robot overlords. I'm sure I'm going to regret that one. But the thing about a voice is that so much of what we do is just digital. And so voice is how we are going to interact with it. And listen, I mean, character AI is, I think, the number 2 or something like that for a reason. This is what, lack of a better term, the AI boyfriends, the AI girlfriends. I think Meta might have this wrong. So I don't want to, I think we were saying that Meta was looking into buying it, or maybe X was or something like that. But point being that these are going to be things. There are things now already, and the latency is bad. So I agree with you that in 3 years we're going to be like, oh, that was nothing. But I think that's because people are going to have real relationships with these AIs. And if you think that sounds crazy or weird, like a Japanese body pillow that people fall in love with or something like that, think again. Go watch the movie Her. I'm telling you, it is uncanny how this captures what I think will be the zeitgeist going forward. Gosh, Jaden, we could talk about voice all day. I feel like, OpenAI, more OpenAI stuff is for another podcast. This is just like so rich, don't you think?
Yeah, no, so interesting. The last thing I want to say on this before we wrap it up, to your point, Connor, is that whether or not people fall in love with the AI boyfriend or girlfriend, or they think it's actual human, like when you go and use an AI tool and you're like, you fall in love with the AI tool, for example, whether or not that actually happens, maybe there's some subset of people, but like I fail to believe is gonna impact the majority. What will impact the majority, which is exactly the same, I bet, is going to be spam and scam versions of that, where it's just like the kind of like all the gold digger or like whatever, like all the stuff online, all the Nigerian scams where it's like the romance scams. That will be very real, where it's like someone on Facebook asks you and they seem very real and normal, and then they start chatting with you, and like the whole thing is just an automated bot, and then you can get on like audio call, or they can do like a FaceTime with you and it's an actual person. Like, and I believe that there will be an insane amount of people that have fallen in love with literal AIs, or not even fallen in love with, just made best friends with. Like, wait, are you telling me Josh, who I've been friends with for like 5 years, who I game with every day, like he's not a real person? Like, I think there's going to be some insanity, and will that have a positive impact on people's mental health? I mean, I've heard the arguments like for it, yes, but like, can you imagine finding out that your best friend that you've spent like 1,000 hours with, talking with, was fake the whole time? I feel like that's got to be sort of.
This is a good time to point out that Jaden, I've never met Jaden in person. That I've only literally like seen his 2-dimensional face. He sounds great. I've seen that. I've seen his 11 labs, all that kind of stuff. Guys, this is huge. And by the way, Jaden, we kind of have that technology right now, like especially with like low latency voice with ChatGPT, be able to come back with strong things with fake images that look absolutely real. Now with Runway, just like little things. I mean, that technology exists now, and especially the older generation has no chance to survive. Listen, on that happy note, we could go on and on about this. Thank you for tuning in to AI Applied today, guys. We can't tell you how much we appreciate you listening. If you are willing to show your support for us, there's just one small thing. We're not asking for anything else, just this. If you would leave a rating and review today, it would be absolutely amazing. We literally read every single one. It's huge. Every time one goes up, Jaden and I text each other and say, hey, we got another rating and review. It really, really means a lot to us. I can't emphasize that enough. It's really the only thing that sort of, we're kind of like asking for this show. And but we really appreciate you listening. Leave a rating and review. Have an amazing rest of your day.